This is day 7 of the September 87 7-day retreat. To give all of us a change of words. I will read from selections from Huang Po's writings as translated by John Blofeld, and some selections from Krishnamurti's writings. The selections from Huang Po are really truly selections. They are excerpts, sometimes an excerpt of a paragraph with words or sentences left out which have a very traditional ring, maybe more difficult to deal with, and are felt to be unnecessary. The word Dharma has been translated into truth. The word Buddha, as used by Huang Po, either refers to the historical personage of Gautama Buddha, or Buddha as a literal translation of the Sanskrit word awakened mind or absolute truth. Huang Po was a Zen teacher and abbot of the, I believe, 9th century in China, and his words and the dialogues were written down by a disciple of his who was a scholar in Buddhism, a Buddhist scholar, and also a government official. I think he was the governor of the province in which Huang Po taught. Since the material comes from copyrighted books, this tape will not be for sale. You have no doubt, or most of you heard these selections many times. What is important in all listening is a new ear, not what is heard, but the hearing being fresh, unencumbered by the process of memory. Also, I may say before beginning to read, because it sometimes comes up as a question whether I'm reading this as my ultimate authority. This is not read to present authority, but to listen to what is being said by someone. Listening in all openness. The Master said to me, all the Buddhas and all sentient beings are nothing but the one mind, beside which nothing exists. This mind, which is without beginning, is unborn and indestructible. It is not green nor yellow and has neither form nor appearance. It does not belong to the categories of things which exist or do not exist, nor can it be thought of in terms of young or old. It is neither long nor short, big nor small, for it transcends all limits, measures, names, traces, and comparisons. It is that which you see before you. Begin to reason about it, and you at once fall into error. It is like the boundless void which cannot be fathomed or measured. The one mind alone is the Buddha, and there is no distinction between the Buddha and sentient beings, but that sentient beings are attached to forms, so seek externally for Buddhahood. By their very seeking, they lose it, for that is using mind to grasp mind. The one mind that is being used, spelled with a capital M, using the mind of thinking to grasp mind capitalized, which is not thought. Even if they do their utmost for a full eon, they will not be able to attain to it. They do not know that if they put a stop to conceptual thought and forget their anxiety, it will appear before them. For this mind is Buddha, and the Buddha is all living beings. It is not the less for being manifested in ordinary beings, nor is it greater for being manifested in the Buddhas. Mind is like the void in which there is no confusion or evil. As when the sun wheels through it, shining upon the four corners of the world. For when the sun rises and illuminates the whole earth, the void gains not in brilliance, and when the sun sets, the void does not darken. The phenomena of light and dark alternate with each other, but the nature of the void remains unchanged. So it is with the mind. If you look upon the Buddha as presenting a pure, bright, or enlightened appearance, or upon sentient beings as presenting a foul, dark, or mortal-seeming appearance, these conceptions resulting from attachment to form will keep you from supreme knowledge, even after the passing of as many eons as there are sands in the Ganges. There's only the one mind, and not a particle of anything else on which to lay hold. Few students of the way do not awake to this mind substance. You will overlay mind with conceptual thought. You will seek the Buddha outside of yourselves, and you will remain attached to forms, pious practices, and so on, all of which are harmful and not at all the way to supreme knowledge. Students of the way should understand that the four elements composing the body do not constitute the self, in quotation marks, that the self is not an entity, and that it follows from this that the body is neither self nor entity. Moreover, the five aggregates composing the mind, and these are thinking, seeing, feeling, willing, and consciousness. Moreover, the five aggregates composing the mind do not constitute either a self nor an entity. Hence, mind is neither self nor entity. The six sense organs, which, together with their six types of perception and the objects of perception, must be understood in the same way. They're all separately and together void, meaning void of self. There's only mind source, limitless in extent, and of absolute purity. If an ordinary person about to die could only see the five elements of consciousness as void, the four physical elements as not constituting an I, the real mind as formless and neither coming nor going, his nature as something neither commencing at his birth nor perishing at his death, but as whole and motionless in its very depth, his mind and environmental objects as one. If he could really accomplish this, there would be enlightenment in a flash. He would no longer be entangled by the triple world meaning past, present, and future. He would be without even the faintest tendency toward rebirth. He should behold the glorious sight of all the Buddhas coming to welcome him, surrounded by every kind of gorgeous manifestation. He would feel no desire to approach them. If he should behold all sorts of horrific forms surrounding him, he would experience no terror. He would just be himself, oblivious of conceptual thought. He would have attained the state of unconditioned being. This, then, is the fundamental principle. Once I put this question to the Master: how many of the 400 or 500 persons gathered here on this mountain have fully understood your Reverence's teaching? And the Master answered, their number cannot be known. Why? Because this way is through mind awakening. How can it be conveyed in words? Speech only produces some effect when it falls on the uninstructed ears of children. When we talk of the knowledge I, in quotes, may gain, the learning I may achieve, my intuitive understanding, my deliverance from rebirth, and my moral way of living, our successes make these concepts seem pleasant to us, but our failures make them appear deplorable. What is the use of all that? I advise you to remain uniformly quiescent and above all activity. Do not deceive yourselves with conceptual thinking, and do not look anywhere for the truth. For all that is needed is to refrain from allowing concepts to arise. It is obvious that mental concepts and external perceptions are equally misleading, and that the way of the Buddhas is as dangerous to you as the way of the demons. Though others may talk of the way of the Buddhas as something to be reached by various pious practices and by scripture study, you must have nothing to do with such ideas. A perception, sudden as blinking, that subject and object are one, will lead to a deeply mysterious, wordless understanding. And by this understanding you will awake to the truth. When you happen upon someone who has no understanding, you must claim to know nothing. He may be delighted by his discovery of some way to enlightenment, yet if you allow yourselves to be persuaded by him, you will experience no delight at all, but suffer both sorrow and disappointment. Even if you do obtain from him some trifling method, it will only be a thought-constructed thing, having nothing to do with truth. Truth is something never lost to you even in moments of delusion, nor is it gained at the moment of enlightenment. It depends on nothing and it is attached to nothing. It is all-pervading, spotless beauty. It is the self-existent and uncreated absolute. Ah, it is a jewel beyond all price. When a sudden flash of thought occurs in your mind, and you see it for a dream or an illusion, then you can enter into the state reached by the Buddhas of the past. Not that the Buddhas of the past really exist, or that the Buddhas of the future have not yet come into existence. Above all, have no longing to become a future Buddha. Your sole concern should be, as thought succeeds thought, to avoid clinging to any of them. And part of the last selection here, but how can we prevent ourselves from falling into the error of making distinctions between this and that? By realizing, says Wangpo, that though you eat the whole day through, no single grain has passed your lips, and that a day's journey has not taken you a single step forward. Also, by uniformly abstaining from such notions as self and other, do not permit the events of your daily lives to bind you, but never withdraw yourselves from them. Avoid the error of thinking of past, present, and future. The past has gone, the present is a fleeting moment, and the future has not yet come. When you practice meditation, sit in the proper position, stay perfectly tranquil, and do not permit the least movement of your minds to disturb you. This alone is what is called liberation. Ah, be diligent, be diligent. This selection was published in the bulletin issued by the Krishnamurti Foundation of America. It's number 45, Spring, Summer 82. And it is an extract from a talk given at Saanen in Switzerland on July 73. And it is on meditation. Meditation is the emptying of the mind of the activity of the self. And this cannot be done by any practice, by any method, or by saying, "Tell me what to do." Therefore, if you're really interested in this, really concerned, you have to find out for yourself your own activity of the self as the you, the habits, the verbal statements, the gestures, the deceptions, the guilt which you cultivate and hold on to, as though it were some precious thing, instead of throwing it out. The punishments, all the activity of the self. And that demands awareness. Now, what is being aware? Awareness implies an observation in which there is no choice whatsoever. Just to observe without interpretation, translation, distortion, and that will not take place as long as there is an observer who is trying to be aware. So can you be aware, attentive, with that attention where there's only observation and no observer? Now listen to this. You have heard that statement. Awareness is a state of mind in which the observer is not. The observer with its choice. You hear that statement and you immediately want to put it into practice, into action. You say, what am I to do? How am I to be aware without the observer? So you want an immediate activity set going, right? And this means you have not really listened to that statement. You're more concerned with putting that statement into action rather than listening to it. It is like looking at a flower, smelling it. The flower is there, the beauty of it, the color, the loveliness of it. You look at it, pick it, and begin to tear it to pieces. And you do the same when you listen to the statement that in awareness, in attention, there's no observer. If the observer is there, you have the problem of choice, conflict, and all that follows. You hear that statement, and the immediate reaction of the mind is, how am I to do it? So you're more concerned with the action to be taken about that statement rather than actually listening to it. If you listen to it completely, then you're breathing the perfume, the truth of it. And the perfume, the truth, acts, not the me that is struggling to act rightly. So if you want to meditate, if you want to find out the beauty of meditation and the depth of it, you have to inquire into and understand the activities of the self, which is put together by time. Please listen to this. Don't do anything about it. Just listen. Find out if it is false or true. Just observe. Listen with your heart, not with your petty little mind. Time is movement, both physically and psychologically. Physically, to move from here to there takes time. Psychologically, the movement of time is to change what is into what should be. So thought, which is time, can never be still because thought is movement. And this movement is part of the self. So when one is aware of the movement of the self, in all its activities as ambition, fulfillment, in relationship and so on, out of that comes a mind that is still. Not thought is still. Do you understand the difference? The numerous people who have come to the speaker from every kind of group of meditation are always concerned with this problem, control and time. Most people are trying to control their thoughts, hoping thereby to bring quietness to the mind. But they don't see that thought is movement. You might divide that movement as the observer and the observed, or the thinker and the thought, or the controller and the controlled. But it is still a movement. Thought can never be still. If it is still, it dies. Therefore, it cannot afford to be still. So if you have gone into all this, into yourself, deeply, then you will see that the mind becomes completely still, not enforced, not controlled, not hypnotized. And it must be still because it is only in that stillness that a totally new, unrecognizable thing can take place. Here are a few selections from Krishnamurti's notebook. I don't have the book here, so I don't know the date. The book contains a journal that was kept over a few months in the different places where Krishnamurti taught, spoke. And these particular selections were written down in Italy. A few sections are left out. There's a huge tall tree in the garden. It has an enormous trunk, and during the night its dry leaves were noisy in the autumnal wind. Every tree in the garden was alive, rustling, and winter was still far away. They were all whispering, shouting, and the wind was restless. But the tree dominated the garden. It towered over the 4-story house, and the river fed it. It was not one of those large rivers, sweeping and dangerous. Its life had been made famous, and it curves in and out of the valleys and enters the sea some distance away. There's always water in it, and there are fishermen hanging over the bridges and along its banks. In the night, the small waterfall complains a great deal, and its noise fills the air. The rustle of leaves, the waterfall, and the restless wind seem to be talking to each other a great deal. It was a lovely morning, with a blue sky and a few clouds scattered about. There are 2 cypresses beyond all others that stand clear against the sky. Again, well after midnight, when the wind was noisy among the trees, meditation became a fierce explosion, destroying all the things of the brain. Every thought shapes every response and limits action. Action born of idea is non-action. Such non-action breeds conflict and sorrow. It was in the still moment of meditation that there was strength. Strength is not the many threads of will. Will is resistance, and the action of will breeds confusion and sorrow, within and without. Strength is not the opposite of weakness. All opposites contain their own contradictions. Here's the next day. It had begun to rain, and the sky was heavy with clouds. Before the sky was covered over entirely, Immense clouds filled the horizon, and it was a marvelous thing to see them. They were so immense and peaceful. It was the peace of enormous power and strength. And the Tuscan hills were so close to them, waiting for their fury. It came during the night, shattering thunder and lightning that showed every leaf aquiver with wind and life. It was a splendid night full of storm, life, and immensity. The body and the brain were very alert, listening to the rustle of leaves and seeing the dawn coming through the dark branches of a tall, straight pine. It had great tenderness and beauty that was past and beyond all thought and emotion. It was there, and with it was benediction. Strength is not the opposite of weakness. All opposites breed further opposites. Strength is not an event of will, and will is action and contradiction. There is a strength that has no cause, that is not put together through multiple decisions. It is that strength that comes into being out of total aloneness. It is that strength which comes when all conflict and effort have completely ceased. It is there when all thought and feeling have come to an end and there's only seeing. It is there when ambition, greed, envy have come to an end without any compulsion. They wither away with understanding. There is that strength when love is death and death life. The essence of strength is humility. How strong is the newborn leaf in spring, so vulnerable, so easily destroyed. And the next day, it had been raining all day. The roads were slushy, and there was more brown water in the river, and the slight fall of the river was making more noise. It was a still night, an invitation to the rains which never stopped till early this morning. And the sun suddenly came out, and towards the west the sky was blue, rain-washed and clean, with those enormous clouds full of light and splendor. It was a beautiful morning, and looking to the west, with a sky so intensely blue, all thought and emotion disappeared, and the seeing was from emptiness. Before dawn, meditation was the immense opening into the unknown. Nothing can open the door save the complete ending of the known. Meditation is explosion in understanding. There is no understanding without self-knowing. Learning about the self is not accumulating knowledge about it. Gathering of knowledge prevents learning. Learning is not an additive process. Learning is from moment to moment, as is understanding. This total process of learning is explosion in meditation. The next day, early this morning, the sky was without a cloud. The sun was coming up behind the Tuscan hills, gray with olive, with dark cypress. There were no shadows on the river, and the aspen leaves were still. A few birds that had not yet migrated were chattering, and the river seemed motionless. As the sun came up behind the river, It cast long shadows on the quiet river. But a gentle breeze was coming over the hills and through the valleys. It was among the leaves, setting them trembling and dancing with the morning sun on them. There were long and short shadows, fat ones and little ones, on the brown sparkling waters. A solitary chimney began to smoke, grey fumes carrying across the trees. It was a lovely morning, full of enchantment and beauty. There were so many shadows and so many leaves trembling. There was perfume in the air, and though it was an autumnal sun, there was the breath of spring. A small car was going up the hill, making an awful noise, but 1,000 shadows remained motionless. It was a lovely morning. The intense energy of life is always there, night and day. It is without friction, without direction, without choice and effort. It is there with such intensity that thought and feeling cannot capture it to mold it according to their fancies, beliefs, experiences, and demands. It is there with such abundance that nothing can diminish it. But we try to use it, to give it direction, to capture it within the mold of our existence, and thereby twist it to conform to our pattern, experience, and knowledge. It is ambition, envy, greed that narrow down its energy, so there is conflict and sorrow. The cruelty of ambition, personal or collective, distorts its intensity, causing hatred, antagonism, conflict. Every action of envy perverts this energy, causing discontent, misery, fear. With fear there is guilt and anxiety and the never-ending misery of comparison and imitation. It is this perverted energy that makes the priest and the general, the politician and the thief. This boundless energy made incomplete by our desire for permanency and security is the soil in which grow barren ideas, competition, cruelty and war. It is the cause of everlasting conflict between man and man. When all this is put aside, with ease and without effort, then only is there that intense energy which can only exist and flower in freedom. In freedom alone it causes no conflict and sorrow. Then alone it increases and has no end. It is life that has no beginning and no end. It is creation, which is love, destruction. Energy used in one direction leads to one thing, conflict and sorrow. Energy that is the expression of total life is bliss beyond measure. We will end here for today.